Not only is it better for individuals, generally it's better for us to be married and have families, and think in terms of health and life expectancy, and even in terms of wealth, but for our society too. It's bizarre to me that we've gotten to the point where people are being convinced that it's a bad thing to have kids. We don't have enough resources. The climate is so bad that you shouldn't be having children. It's a selfish thing to want to have children. And it's really backwards to me.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. On today's episode, I am here in studio in Nashville, and we have a returning guest. She is a health and fitness coach, and she is also a podcaster, and just an all-around awesome and inspiring human being. And this is Gina Bontempo. Welcome back. How are you doing?
Thank you. It's nice to see you. Last time we did an episode, it was virtual.
Yep.
So we are in person today. It's nice.
Exactly. Gina, for those who may not be familiar with who you are and your story, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, where to start? I live here local in Nashville, the Nashville area. I'm a mom of two. I've been living here for the past 3 years. I do a lot of health and fitness coaching, been doing the YouTube and podcasting game for a little bit now. And originally from Georgia, which people are usually surprised about. I used to live in California, so people automatically just think I'm a Californian. But my husband and I met in San Francisco, so we were living there for a few years. We got out right before the pandemic in January of 2020.
I love that you say got out.
We got out. We escaped.
Not that you moved, you escaped, yeah.
No, we barely escaped. And it's funny because I escaped because I was working for Candace Owens at the time. And we moved so I could, be in the same area as her in DC. And so she would always joke, she was like, I saved you. I saved you from San Francisco. And in a way, it's true. So we were in the DC, Virginia area for a little bit. And then we came here in 2021 and just really enjoying the South since. So yeah, it's been good. Life is really all about motherhood these days. I quit working for Candace when I had my first child, and that was tough to do because I loved my job. Yeah. I mean, it was a fun, exciting job, and you got to meet amazing people, and Candace is Candace. But I just really wanted to spend more time being a mom and have just been really enjoying it. Been blessed.
Today's episode is brought to you by BitBox. As I'm sure you've noticed by now, inflation is a major issue. The more money that central banks print, the less your dollars, pounds, and euros are worth. When it comes to government-issued fiat currency, inflation is inevitable. That's why for many years I've been saving in Bitcoin. It's scarcer than gold, and it cannot be inflated by any central bank. But if you're going to buy and hold Bitcoin, it's vital that you store it securely, because leaving your coins on exchanges is risky and leaves them vulnerable to potential hacks. That's where today's sponsor, BitBox, comes in. BitBox is a Swiss-made hardware wallet that allows you to store your Bitcoin easily and safely. It only takes a few minutes to set up a wallet and take full custody of your coins the same way I do. Secure your Bitcoin today with a BitBox. Go to bitbox.swiss/Zuby to get 5% off a hardware wallet today. That's bitbox.swiss/Zuby for 5% off. You came into the studio with your baby this morning.
Yes.
So who is now
17 weeks.
17 weeks.
Yeah.
old.
So
Okay.
he'll be almost 4 months old. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. He's going to turn 4 months officially in a few days. So yeah, had my second baby a few months ago. It's been good. The whole summer has just been like the newborn phase, which is like you get lost. It's kind of like a black hole. It's kind of like a vortex. It's amazing. It's just all the snuggles and the 3-hour wake window and feeding and up all night. And so I just feel like the summer flew by. I just looked up and I'm like, oh, it's September. It kind of feels like fall now. But yeah, it's been all about the baby life.
Amazing. So you've been a mom for approaching 3 years now. How has that transformed your life?
Man, where to start? Yeah, a lot of women say that their life started when they became moms, and I can understand what they mean when they say that. I wouldn't quite say that for me, but I will say that it has opened up a much more profound level of love and sacrifice and meaning that it's truly impossible to put into words. And I was thinking about this the other day. I think one of the reasons why so many women struggle with motherhood, and I can only speak from a woman's side, I don't know if this is really the same for fathers, but I think one of the reasons so many women struggle with motherhood is because it can be a very thankless job in the moment. And we are so used to living in a culture that is about accolades and recognizing people's hard work and giving awards and saying you did a great job. And we're so used to getting that praise, right? And that starts, especially when you think about the school system, it starts from a very young age. You get grades and you get your test scores back and there's an honor roll system and you get recognized by your teachers. But when you're a mom, there are very few moments where you get thanked for your hard work. And it is like the kind of hard work and sacrifice and physical fatigue and emotional fatigue that I don't think you'll get anywhere else. It's just a very different kind of tired and a different kind of sacrifice. And when you're a mom, especially of young children, your kids are not going to thank you. Thank you, mommy, for staying up late all night. Thank you, mommy, for carrying me for 9 months and going through birth and the pain of birth. Thank you, mommy, for, not going to the bathroom and feeding me and not eating a meal and feeding me, because there's so many things that you have to give up for your kids, especially in the early years. So it can be really hard in the first few years because it is thankless. And not to say that a mother shouldn't be thanked. That's why I always tell husbands, like, thank your wife as much as you can. Like, thank you for doing this. And the vice versa, too. The opposite, of course, is true. We should always be thanking our husbands for what they do for us. But the more that I step into motherhood and really surrender to it, the more I realize that it can be very difficult if you look at it as an experience where you should be thanked and you should be recognized.
Yes.
And I think about it too from a Christian perspective. I'm an Orthodox Christian, and I was listening to Father Josiah Trenum.
Love that guy.
He's great.
I need to get him on my podcast.
Yeah, he would. That would be a great guest. And he was talking about the act of service as a Christian. Christ calls us to give to people without expecting thanks, without expecting some kind of recognition. And I think that's how I think about motherhood, is that you really have to give it your all without expecting your children to turn around and say, thank you, mommy. Even though they say thank you in their own way. They love you in the way they look at you, and they just want to be with mommy. And that is in and of itself a reward. But that's been on my mind a lot lately. And I think that's sort of the depth of sacrifice and meaning that I have come to recognize since I became a mom.
That's really interesting. And the way I see it, I think in particularly modern Western societies, the role of both mothers and fathers, and to be honest, anything that has to do with masculine and feminine polarity, has been massively denigrated, if not demonized, since before we were born. And we're now living in an era where we are sort of witnessing the fallout and the culmination of that. In most of the world and through most of human history, the role of the mother has been divine and massively appreciated. And everyone knows how important it is. But due to a combination of feminism and what people call progress in various ways, it's reached a point where even amongst most modern women, particularly younger ones, their motherhood itself and the act of childbearing is viewed almost like a curse or a pathology that's something to be solved, not something that is a gift and a blessing, and in fact the greatest superpower and contribution that women can make to humanity, quite literally bringing new life into the world. Everyone who exists and ever has existed was born of a woman. And I think people who are religious, whether they're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whatever it is, they still massively understand that. And it's very much in all of the texts and in the teachings. But modern society is so directly and indirectly opposed to that. Young women are taught, even by very well-meaning parents, put your everything's career first, professionalism. Your measure of success should be the exact same as a man's. Not just a man, but almost like a very ambitious, perhaps single man. That is the measure, right? So it's all about income and education and, hey, men are earning this much more, and so we need to get. It's like, why? Who even decided that the measure should be income? Particularly when you consider that, yes, overall, if you take the entire population of most countries, sure, men overall earn more, women spend more. Women have more free time. Women are, so it's like, okay, so is the power in earning capacity? Or is it in where those resources go? Who even came up with the idea that the measure of success is your income? and your net worth
Right.
and all of these things. What about all the other things that matter? And I just think so many people have been brainwashed and psyoped over the decade to reach this point where, I mean, you'll even hear women, particularly feminists, talking about motherhood as unpaid labor.
Yes.
So that tells you something about their thinking. The fact that you are even expecting financial compensation for raising your own children would have been that would be considered insane in most of the world.
Lunacy.
And all through most history, it's like, well, yes, it's not rewarded monetarily, but how messed up is your psychology and your spirit that you even view it in that economic lens?
Yeah.
It's just a massive sign of corruption and inversion to me.
It's like they view children as an economic unit.
Yes.
And you said, where are we spiritually that we think about it this way? And that to me is the heart of it. It's a spiritual sickness, is that we see motherhood and family as logically it doesn't make sense. You hear a lot of these young women, and it breaks my heart because they, in a way, I feel like they're doomed, which is a horrible thing to say. But you see these young women talk about pregnancy and motherhood, and they're like, I don't want to gain 40 pounds. I can't believe you would willingly push a baby out of your body. I don't want to stay up all night.
Parasite.
A parasite. And they say these things, and I'm like, yes, logically, it actually doesn't make sense. Logically, it's like, why would I give up all of this when I'm not getting anything in return right away? But to me, the root of it is a spiritual sickness, is that we see everything in these material ways, and everything has to be materialistically right away worth it for us, right? Everything is just fast. We want the short-term response. We don't think about the long game. And it really is spiritually, we don't understand the meaning of family, of marriage, of children, of motherhood, of fatherhood. And that to me is the root of everything, is that we are so stuck in this materialist society that we have become consumers with a capital C, that we no longer understand. And I mean, I think even taking it a bit further, I think really when you take a lot of the Christian values out of America, that's when you end up with these ideas and these ideologies that degrade children into economic units. And this whole idea of unpaid labor, like domestic labor at home, I'm not getting paid to clean the dishes and put my baby to bed. And these women will like calculate how many hours they spend at home.
I've seen it.
And my husband is out and he's getting paid and I don't get paid to do anything. And so when he gets home, he has to do this and that. And I'm just like,
it's also kind of wild because you kind of are also getting paid. Like if your husband is out working.
Aren't you literally getting
bringing
paid?
in money for your entire family, and you don't want to wash the dishes because that's not direct. Sorry, carry on. It just kind of blows my mind when I see and hear these things. I'm just like, I don't even know where to begin to unravel this, because at every level the thinking is just corrupted.
Yeah, it's really sad, because then you think about the birth replacement rate in the U.S. It's not even, I think it's 2.1. It's barely even replacement rate.
It's about 1.6 right now.
Is it?
I think
okay, so we're not even at replacement rate. No. And it's declining. It's going down. That prediction that by 2030, what was however many percentage of women are going to be single and childless?
I think half.
Half.
Is it half of women over 30 or 35?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, and people get really mad when they hear that statistic, but it's not only is it better for individuals, generally it's better for us to be married and have families, and think in terms of health and life expectancy, and even in terms of wealth, but for our society too. It's bizarre to me that we've gotten to the point where people are being convinced that it's a bad thing to have kids. We don't have enough resources. The climate is so bad that you shouldn't be having children. It's a selfish thing to want to have children. And it's really backwards to me. And look, I say this as somebody who, I went to college. I did the whole, I did the good girl thing where I went to college, I went to graduate school, and I checked off all the boxes that I was told I was supposed to. And there was certainly a time where I fell into a lot of these ideologies, going to these.
You used to write about it.
Yeah, I did. You can Google and find the things that I used to write about: intersectional feminism and body positivity and cultural appropriation. I went to these liberal universities. I got a liberal arts degree. Three of them. I got 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's in theological studies. So as someone who comes from that way of thinking, it still seems to me absurd, because even when I considered myself liberal and I considered myself to be a, quote, feminist, I still would never think of children as these parasites or economic units that were not worth having.
Yeah.
There was still a part of me that recognized the beauty of family and the beauty of children. So it's weird that we've gotten here.
Yeah. I have my thoughts on this, but how do you think that we've arrived at this point?
Well, I honestly think it goes back even as far as the extended family being broken apart. I've been doing a lot of thinking about this because the obsession with the nuclear family, and I think this is one of the, I guess for a lack of a better word, it's a weakness of the right. The way that the right and conservatives are so obsessed with the nuclear family, mom, dad, and children, hyper individualized in American society. I mean, if you think about statistically in the early to mid 1900s, more than 75% of elderly people either lived with their family or very, very close to them. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you break down the extended family unit, I'm not saying that mother and father and children are not important. Of course, in many ways, that's the core of the family. But when you separate the mother and the father and the children from the rest of the family, you separate them from tradition, you separate them in many ways from culture, from their own culture, and you definitely separate them from a lot of religious communities. And I think that was really the start of a lot of breakdown of culture, breakdown of religion, breakdown of these traditional values. And it's odd because I see a lot of this trad wife trend stuff. You know, the trad wife thing is now, I mean, it's almost like a fetish online now, right? You see these girls who are making big money being
I don't see it that much because I'm a guy and I don't follow those types of accounts. I'm aware it's a phenomenon, but I don't really see it that much.
And it's based on the 1950s housewife,
yes,
which that in and of itself was an anomaly. The idea of the mom at home by herself all day. And if you look at it a little bit deeper too, it was a marketing ploy. It was a very capitalist effort to sell washer machines and these new dishwashers and all these new appliances and new refrigerators. While the dad was in a suit at work, he came home at 5 o'clock and there was a nice roast on the table that you used all of your new appliances to make. But I think when you separate the mother and the father and the children so far away from the extended family, I think it opens up the door for a lot of brainwashing, a lot of programming, sending kids off to public school, sending kids off to daycare. That's when things really started to break down. And then you can add on from there. And then, of course, feminism and everything else.
Yeah. For you, what was the turning point from going from liberal feminist type of thought to where you are now, Orthodox Christian, conservative? I mean, that's quite the shift. Can you walk us through that process?
I don't know if I can pinpoint the exact start, but I can definitely walk you through some of the things that opened my eyes. I think one of the first things that opened my eyes was learning what abortion actually was. Because I always considered myself pro-choice. I was one of those people that said, I would never get an abortion, but it's not my place to stop another woman from getting one. Yeah. And I think that's pretty much what most women think today. And we've been programmed to believe that if you're a girl's girl, if you love women, then you're going to support their right to choose. But I think a lot of women, and this was where I was at too when I was in school, they don't really know what an abortion is.
Yep.
They don't really understand that that baby has to come out some way or the other. It doesn't just disappear. It doesn't just go away. It's not just a quote clump of cells. And that was a big turning point for me when I learned the difference between a medical abortion and a surgical abortion, and learned about what a baby's development is even at 6 weeks pregnant. And that to me opened the door. I was like, wait a second, I don't even like the terms pro-choice and pro-life. Today, I don't even use those terms because I think they're both propaganda. I use the terms pro-abortion and anti-abortion because pro-choice to me doesn't really mean anything. So that was a big turning point for me. And then for me personally, and I was talking about this with, I'm sure you know, Alex Feinberg. He was on my podcast recently. It was really the leadership of men in my life, family members and extended family and friends, who really helped me understand a lot of the ways that I had been programmed in school. And I'll always remember one of the things that opened up my mind was learning about how universal healthcare is not all that it's cracked up to be. Because I just thought free healthcare, everybody deserves free healthcare, right? and really learning about what that actually means for the structure of our economy, what it means for our country. And it was just little by little, it was almost like little goalposts as the months went on. And I was actually living in San Francisco at the time.
Hyper-liberal.
Hyper-liberal. It was so liberal, it turned me conservative.
Okay. That makes sense.
Because you've been there.
Yeah,
you
many
walk
times.
you walk on the streets,
Yeah.
urine, feces,
Yeah.
needles, all
It's the
sorts
opposite
of
Dubai.
in every way. They hate children.
Yeah.
They love the homeless.
You don't even see children there.
Yeah, no, none. My husband and I were talking about that because we met in San Francisco. He's like, do you ever remember seeing kids? I was like, no. You're like not allowed to be pregnant in San Francisco. It's like not allowed. But it turned me conservative because I could not believe how much they were giving to the homeless and how much they were giving to criminals. I could not believe
over
it.
$100,000 per homeless person in terms of the budget.
Right.
And it keeps getting worse.
And worse. And I remember there was a point where you used to have to bring in a used needle to get a clean needle. You had to trade it out. But then they were like, oh, you don't have to bring a used one. Just come in. We'll give you a clean one. And even little policy changes like that, they make a difference. And then they started giving out free, if you have a dog, we'll give you free dog food. And so they would just bring all these dogs and just get free dog food and then like sell it or do whatever with it. And I just remember looking around and every single person I know who had a car, they had it broken into, probably multiple times.
Yep.
It was a rite of passage. And I'm looking around and I'm like, I grew up in South Georgia outside Savannah in a very small town with one stoplight, like 10 churches anywhere. I'm like, you guys know you don't have to live like this, right? You know that you don't have to have your car broken into. This is not like a normal way to live. And it just got the wheels turning for me. And it really...
What year was that around?
2017.
Okay.
2017. So this was after Trump was elected. And when Trump first came into office, I thought I hated him. And then a friend of mine asked me, will you watch an unedited speech of Trump? And I said, no way. Are you crazy? He's racist.
Man, they had you good.
I was like, he called some woman a dog. I'm like, no way. And I watched it. They somehow convinced me to watch it, and I can't explain it to you. I remember watching it and being like, I feel safe. I feel safe. I feel like this guy cares about America. I feel like America is going to be safer with him. It's really hard to explain.
Do you know which speech it was?
It's somewhere in Ohio. I forgot what it was, but it was like an hour long. He was just like riffing for a while. You know, he was just Trump being Trump. And I realized how much I liked him.
That's so funny.
Because I mean, honestly, I don't know how you can't like Trump, but it was just one of those things where the veil was pulled back and I realized, okay, something's not right here. And at the time I was working at a women's digital media company that was getting like, I mean, they probably still millions of views. And of course, everything in the office, they had all the TVs with the statistics about 70% of our employees are women, and we do this and this and this for women, and half of our board is women, and everything was about Hillary Clinton. And I remember going into the office feeling like I had to hide something because every Friday and Saturday night, I would watch these videos. I would watch like Victor Davis Hanson, I would watch Candace Owens, and I would sometimes watch Charlie Kirk, and I was like, I feel like I'm hiding something. And so it just, it kind of unraveled from there. And I remember deleting my Twitter in 2017. I was like, I got to get rid of this. Because I think I tweeted once that I like missed Obama. I was like, I got to get rid of this. So I deleted my Twitter and I told myself, I'm going to take off at least a year from saying anything online. And I'm just going to sort of re-educate myself. And that's what I did. So I spent about a year and a half not putting anything out about politics or culture, and I just sort of had to relearn a lot of things. But there was I wouldn't say there was like one turning point. You know, a lot of people can say this is when it happened. It wasn't really like that for me. It was just a lot of things that added up, and a big part of it was just being in San Francisco and seeing the effects of these super Democrat policies, these uber, quote, progressive policies that really left these cities decimated, and good taxpayers, you know, their lives were suffering because of these policies.
And they continue to vote for it.
Over and over again.
Yeah. Today's podcast is sponsored by my book, Strong Advice, Zuby's Guide to Fitness for Everybody. When it comes to health, exercise, and nutrition, there are a huge number of resources available. Some are great, but others, not so much. The problem with a lot of fitness advice is it's unnecessarily complicated. This can leave you feeling even more confused, with underwhelming and unsustainable results. Most diets fail, and even when they do work, most people simply regain the weight. Strong Advice is different because the sole goal of the book is to help you and not to confuse you. It's simple enough for beginners, but detailed enough for experienced lifters. No nonsense, just valuable information. Strong Advice has already helped thousands of people to achieve and maintain their fitness goals, and whether your goal is to lose fat, build muscle, or just get in better shape, it can help you too. Visit zubyfitness.com to get $10 off the ebook or audiobook version of Strong Advice. That's zubyfitness.com, and as a loyal podcast listener, you'll automatically get $10 off. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. That's one of the things that I found most intriguing. I'd say 2019 was a really transformative year for me, just in terms of my career trajectory, and also really it was really my introduction to the USA, because that's when I had my deadlift tweet, which went viral at the beginning of 2019, and that put me on the radar of everyone from Ben Shapiro to Tucker Carlson to Joe Rogan to Candace Owens. Like, all of these people discovered me through that, and I came out to the US for 3 months. I initially was going to just come for about 2 weeks and just go to LA, but I got invited to go on Dave Rubin's show, then Joe Rogan, and then the Daily Wire reached out, so I did shows with them, and PragerU, and then I ended up going to Texas, recording with Glenn Beck and The Blaze, and next thing I'm in Nashville, I'm in DC, I'm in New York. I just kept extending my trip out there, and that was really my intro to the USA. And after LA, my next stop was San Francisco, so my first time ever in the city was September 2019. And at this point, I'm already a very well-traveled guy. By that point, I've probably been to about 30 different countries and 100 different cities. And I got to San Francisco. And I saw some of this in LA, but in San Francisco, I saw things that I have never seen anywhere in any of my travels in my entire life. My mind was blown. I was just like, oh, that guy's just injecting heroin right there. Like, oh, you can smoke crack on the street in broad daylight. I was walking over bodies, and I was like, I hope this person is alive. Okay, they're breathing. That's good. And perhaps more than the filth and the squalor and the degeneracy I was seeing and smelling was the apathy around me. It felt like I was the only one who could see it. So I've just come over from the UK. I've never been in California in my life. And I'm just there in awe, walking around, downtown, the Tenderloin, and I'm just like, what is this? This is one of the richest cities in the richest state, in the richest country in the world, and there are thousands of Americans, citizens, and you're just letting them wallow in their own filth like this. It was disgusting, and I was genuinely in awe and horrified. And I was talking to, because I was traveling around by Uber or whatever, and I'm very extroverted. I talk to people, and I'm talking to my Uber drivers, and I'm just like, what's going on here? Why is it like this? And everyone seemed to, this was 2019, so I remember so many conversations where they would recognize the problem and even sort of complain about it, but then it would go to talking bad about Trump or Republicans or this or that, and I'm there thinking, I'm like, I'm not an expert here. I'm not from this country, but hasn't this place been run by Democrats for decades and decades? Like, what does Trump have to do with what's happening here? And it seemed like no one could connect the dots. To this day, it's like people don't connect the dots between the people and policies that they vote for and the in real life results. And there was just this strange dissonance. And even when I was talking to people there and I was telling them, the things that I was seeing, I stayed with a friend who's lived in San Francisco and worked there for a long time. And I was just telling him all about it. And I was just like, dude, he was like, dude, why did you go downtown? I was like, what do you mean? I'm in a city. I go downtown in every city in the world. Like, he's like, dude, I never go downtown. Like, I was, and I was just like, what? So people just avoid this entire central zone of the city, and I didn't even know he had a car because he didn't park it on the street. Like, I found out later at the end of the week that he had a car, and I was like, oh, like, I didn't know. He's like, yeah, you can't park your car on the street here. It'll get broken into.
Yep.
And I'm just there. I was like, how much do you pay for rent? Like, what is going on here? Like, I've been to, my family background's originally from Nigeria. I've been to developing countries. I've been to parts of Africa, parts of, and I've just never seen this. I was like, this is not just sort of normal. This is not just poverty, right? I've seen poverty before. But this is just complete despair. It's just despair and hopelessness, and just the level of drugs. I'd never before that time just seen people doing hard drugs just like right with my own eyes. I've seen it in movies or read stuff in books or whatever, or behind closed doors people doing things, but it was just completely open. And then I went back again in 2021. I went back again last year and this year. I interviewed Elon there, and this is like June 2023, and I was like, let me not be bigoted. I was here in 29. I was here, a couple years ago, but I did a 9-mile walk through the city.
Yeah.
Because I had a bunch of time. We did the interview in the evening, so I had all day. I was like, let me leave my hotel. I'm just going to walk through San Francisco. Very walkable city.
Yeah.
So I just walked through the entire thing. I was like, okay, I haven't been here since the whole pandemic situation. Let me see what it's like. Is it as bad as I remember? Is it better? Has it gotten worse? I was like, it's gotten even worse.
Yeah.
It's gotten even worse. And it's not just what you see, it's the smell. I was just like, this is crazy. And at that time, I remember there were just pride flags everywhere. I was like, this is the perfect example of a virtue signal. You have thousands of human beings out here suffering with drug addiction, falling into overdoses, being victimized by violence and Lord knows what else. And you're all walking around just ignoring this problem, acting like it doesn't exist. And then you put up 1 million rainbow flags and virtue signal, and that's supposed to make it okay. And I was like, that is a perfect analogy of this entire ideology that is running the city. You just do the virtue signal, and you do not give a crap, really, about the results of all of this. So, that's a bit of a rant right there.
Yeah, even from when I moved there in 2017 and left very beginning of 2020, even between those couple of years, it got way worse. When I got there in 2017, it was bad. It was not nearly that bad. And then 2018 and then 2019. And I just remember by the time 2019 came around, my husband and I looked at each other. We were like, okay, it's definitely time to get out. I mean, we wanted to get out the year before, but it's hard when you're there. So it's hard when you have a life somewhere. And so I often ask, I have a lot of family in New York City too. And my cousin, his wife, and their daughter. And I'm like, why don't you just get out? Yeah. He's like, we've been here forever. This is our home. This is where we live. Her family's here. My wife's family's here. Like, this is just where we are. It can be hard to get out. But I remember just looking at my husband, we were like, this is crazy. And like stories of, I mean, people would, I'm not even going to tell some of the stories. Okay, I'll tell one story. I'll tell one story. Like, these two obviously drug addicts, homeless people, having a fight in the middle of the street, stopping traffic in the middle of the street. And the woman starts running. The guy pulls down his pants, takes a dump in his hand, and throws it at her.
What?
And the pedestrians are like telling other people to look away. Like, give them some space. Give him some space. Come on, guys, give him some space. It's not your business. And I'm like, they're just defecated and throwing it defecated in his hand and threw it at her. What do you mean? And you start to feel like, am I the person taking crazy pills?
Yes.
Why? And I know what you mean. It's hard to explain to people who have never been to San Francisco or cities similar to it, or like Seattle or whatever, because they're like, oh, it can't be that bad.
It sounds like you're exaggerating.
It sounds like you're exaggerating. It sounds like you're being hyperbolic. But you cannot understand unless you're there that you feel like you're in this alternate universe where you're taking crazy pills, because literally every other person around you is like, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
It's like a GTA server.
It's totally
fine. There's
fine.
Just chaos going on. And people are just kind of walking around all apathetic.
Just like totally blank. And they'll, just like you said, they'll step over bodies. It's almost like they'll pretend. And then you have all the tech bros and the project managers, and they're going to Google and they're wearing their outfits, sunglasses.
Like
and
some of them are slowly starting to complain about it a bit more vocally. I remember I had a whole Twitter thread go viral back in 2019 when I was first there. And I was just writing about my experience. It was just a chain of how I just saw this. This is where I am. I've just witnessed this. So people were like avidly following this story of this British guy being in San Francisco for the first time on a Saturday, late afternoon, early evening. I remember it got so bad that because I'd been at a place like in the south of the city, and I was staying further up north, and I'd met up with some guys, and it was maybe about 7 p.m. and I was leaving, and I was going to call an Uber, and then I was like, you know what? Like I'm in a new city. It's about a hour walk to get back to where I am. Let me just walk. Like, it's a Saturday evening. Let me just go for a walk. And I got to the downtown / tenderloin area. And I saw so many crazy things from people. It felt extremely unpredictable. It's rare for me to be in a city anywhere and to feel unsafe. Very rare. And it felt so chaotic and unpredictable that I remember I got to that point. I was like, I'm going to get an Uber the rest of the way. I didn't want to continue walking. And I say this as like, you know, a bigger than average male who trains and who can generally handle myself. I'm like, I can't imagine walking through here, like being a young woman or something like that. There were just people just chattering to themselves. There was a park I walked past. There were about 20 people just injecting heroin, just in the park, like all like tying each other's arms up. Like I was just there, just openly. I remember walking past 3 guys, and they had one of them was on a leash, like 3 gay guys, and one of them was like on a leash, and they were like in kind of like bondage fetish gear. I walked past a dude, surprised, we had like a swastika tattooed on his head, and I remember we made eye contact, and I was a bit like, I was approaching him, and I saw it, I was a bit like, odd, San Francisco, like, and
that's weird.
You know, we looked at each other, and then we just kind of did like the disarming nod. And I was like, okay. I was like, he had a big, skinhead guy just had a big swastika on the side of his head. And I was approaching, and I was like, is this going to be a kind of issue? So, you know, you sort of tense up in case, like, he's going to say something. Is it? And it was like, no, okay. I was like, okay, maybe he's like reformed or something like that. And then I walked past, I see a guy fighting a traffic cone and cussing at it. Just like yelling, shouting. I was like, he's fighting a traffic cone, like kicking it, punching it. I was just like, what is this? Yeah. What is this place?
It's hellish.
And there were people just that, I don't know, that fentanyl.
Yeah,
just
the sway.
Hunched over, just walking. I was just like, I don't know. Anything could happen right now. Someone might just like throw a bottle at me, or I was like, you know, this is not worth This is not worth the risk for me.
Yeah.
And I remember writing about that, and there were some locals who saw the thread, and you know, there were some people who empathized and were like, "Dude, yeah, it's crazy. This is what we deal with." But then there were other people who were really mad at me for talking about it. I remember there was when people are more angry at the people who talk about the problem than they're angry at the problem. I'm like, dude, I don't live here. I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm not writing this for some political reason or anything else. I'm just documenting this like I document my travels to different places. If you're mad at me for telling the truth about what is going on here in the streets in your city, then maybe you do something to sort this out. Like, why are you mad at me? That was someone accused me of what do they call it? Not poverty tourism, but there's like a term when people typically go on trips to like developing countries.
Okay.
And they sort of document the bad sides of certain things. There's a term they use for it.
Okay, like I'd probably recognize it.
Something tourism, and people were accusing me of that. I'm like, bro, I'm in California. You got to travel to California to do, you know what I mean? To do third world tourism. Like, no, I didn't expect this. I'm just genuinely shocked, and I feel I need to share.
The CEO and the founder of the media company I was working for in San Francisco, this happened, I think, a year or two ago. I saw on his Twitter, he lives in the richest part of San Francisco. I mean, like they're worth millions and millions. And he and his 3 daughters and wife they happened to be on vacation. And they had the security footage of these people breaking in and just raiding their house and stealing a bunch of stuff. And he was telling the whole story online. And there were some people on Twitter, they were like, so are you going to move? Like, are you going to stop voting for these politicians who usher in the policies that basically decriminalize this kind of stuff? And it was another disconnect. You know, this guy was like, I'm so glad we're safe. And then he was like trying to make it sound like they're in need. You know, we're very fortunate. We're privileged, of course, the word privileged. We're very privileged, and essentially being like, it's okay that you came in to steal all of our stuff. At least we're alive. Like, we're rich. Yeah. You just needed to feed your family by taking our stereo and our TV. Like, at least we're rich, so it's going to be okay. But I remember seeing them like, oh yeah, you were my boss's boss. I remember you. And I remember, because his wife was also, I think, president of the media company. And I remember seeing their daughters. Like, after that, wouldn't that be some sort of major change for you because, I mean, they're like, of course, very, very liberal. And supportive of all these policies that decriminalize stuff like this. But even when it happens in your own home, it's still not enough for people to change their mind about it.
No, there's a mad disconnect. I mean, there was that guy who got stabbed to death. Was it last year? He was someone who worked, a big guy at one of the tech companies.
I remember that. Yeah.
He got murdered over there.
Yeah, that's right.
And, again, you get the short term, oh, R.I.P., this is horrible, whatever. And then, again, very few people seem to want to do something about the circumstances that led to that. And as far as I could see, like it seemed, I don't know all the details, but it seemed like it was quite sort of random. It wasn't something that would have typically happened in a normal place. Yeah, it's odd. I mean, man, I could rant on San Francisco for ages, but let's shift gears a little bit. Tell me about how you met your husband.
At jiu-jitsu.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. He's You know what? Jake Shields is right.
Oh gosh.
I never met Jake in person, but I think my husband actually trained with him once because anyway, but yes, Jake Shields is kind of right. I wanted to learn some self-defense, and I was like, I'm really curious about jiu-jitsu. I've been in health and fitness forever, and I was like, I really want to try one combat sport. So my friend was like, go to Half Gracie. Half Gracie has been like one of the biggest jiu-jitsu gyms in San Francisco forever, and that's where my husband, he was teaching all of the beginner classes. And he still teaches today, like 3 or 4 days a week before he goes to work. He gets up at 5 and he goes to teach, and that's like the thing that he loves to do. And I took his class for a little while, and we were just kind of like friends, and we were friends for a while, and then it eventually, turned into something more. But that's how we met. So I actually tell a lot of girls, I'm like, if you want to meet a nice guy who is like, obviously fit, because the thing about martial arts guys is that guys in fitness in general, but they're generally disciplined. They're healthy, obviously. They're not going to be the kind of guys who are going to be out partying a lot, because you can't party a lot and go fight and go train very often. And like, these are generally, it's generally a good pool of guys to choose from. And 2 of my friends took that advice, and one of them is engaged now.
Interesting.
And another one is seriously dating a guy that she kind of met at jiu-jitsu. So yeah, that's how we met.
Okay.
It's just so funny. Jake Shields said that, because when he tweeted that, I was like, you know what? I'm never letting my daughter train jiu-jitsu with guys, like ever. Yeah. Like my husband wants to take our daughter one day when she's older, but like to the girls' classes, because for a while I was doing just the girls' classes. There were some like beginner classes that my husband was teaching that was like co-ed, but then every Monday and Wednesday they had like a women's class. Mm-hmm. And Half Gracie was big enough in San Francisco. There was like a whole women's team. But Jake Shields is not wrong. It's one of those things where you literally have your legs wrapped around somebody.
Yeah.
You gotta be careful.
All right. So let's talk about marriage.
Yeah.
I like the fact that on your podcasts and on social media and all that, you're very in tune, I think, with just a lot of the sort of modern day cultural issues and strange things that society is going through. You're a millennial, right? Mm-hmm. We're both millennials. Mm-hmm. And I think we're in an interestingly unique position and generation in many ways. Firstly, we are the last generation that remembers the world, that will remember the world pre-smartphones and social media.
Yeah.
We've seen a huge amount of social, cultural, technological, political, religious shift in our lifetimes. And when you look at people who are Gen Z or younger, they're never going to be aware of a time when everything wasn't documented and people didn't have cameras and video cameras on them all the time, and the ability to share, and YouTube and Instagram and all of these things. And I think a lot of older people, they don't quite understand just how much, maybe they can't understand how much it's changed the world and changed the way people interact with and communicate with each other. I mean, if we go back, I remember 15 plus years ago, like if someone said that they met their boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse on the internet, or if someone was even just on an internet dating site, mm-hmm. it was for dorks.
Yeah.
It was like, especially 20 plus years ago, it was like, what? Like, what do you mean you're on a website, like a dating website?
Yeah.
Like, that is weird. Or even just having an online friend. If in 2004,
someone was like, oh yeah, I've got like this friend online. It's a bit like, are you okay, dude? Are you sit there on MSN Messenger and you chat with each other, and now it's just all of that is normal, and we've had all of this new introduction, and we're at that point where you've kind of got the before and the after, and as I said, I just think it's so people massively underestimate that, but it's had major repercussions on male-female relationships, dating, mating, marriage or not. Even what you were talking about earlier in terms of attitudes towards all these things, attitudes towards children. Of course, it's had a massive shift on politics and all of these things. So what is the exact question I even want to ask right here? What is your current read of, let's broadly say, male-female relationships in our modern world?
I mean, I'll be perfectly honest, I'm slightly black-pilled on it because the discourse online right now is so heated, and it really, I can see where both are kind of coming from. Right now,
when you say both, what do you mean?
So, for example, the men online, and we can talk a little bit, like the red pill manosphere influence. Like, I completely understand some of the things they're saying. We live in a very gynocentric society. Women are offered a lot more slack for a lot of different things than men are. In the courts and family courts, women are often almost always favored over men, and a wife can take a husband to court and take everything he's got in the blink of an eye. Things like that. Like, I can understand a lot of these issues that these men online are bringing up. And then you see the other side where these women are still very millennial feminist coded. They see everything from this feminist perspective of, well, what are you going to bring to the table? You have to give me a reason to marry you. And now you see a lot of these women that are from a young age, they were in the education system and they were taught to achieve certain things, and you get a good job and then you climb the corporate ladder. And then these women do that very thing. They climb the corporate ladder. Then they're 30, 33, 35 years old. And it's getting harder and harder and harder to find a husband, because when you're 35 and you're working in this high-powered corporate environment, your peers, the only men that these women will consider worthy of dating, because these women would never, ever consider dating like a plumber or a mechanic. Hypergamy, it's very real. And I think it's foolish for women to claim that it's not real. So then you have a lot of these women who they get online, they turn on their camera, they get on TikTok, and they cry because I've been single for 7 years, I can't find a guy. So there are these two sides that are really colliding right now. And it makes me almost feel like we're a little bit doomed. I mean, I'm almost glad I got out early. Like, I'm glad I'm not single. I'm so glad I'm married with kids now, because I don't know how I could possibly navigate this dating landscape. It's really tough because it's harder than ever for these men and women online to see eye to eye. And in a way, I can see a little bit more of where the men are coming from, because I think the women have just been so, like I said, so feminist coded for such a long time, and they can't see that the choices they have made in life, even if they didn't, they obviously didn't consciously do it in a way like, well, I'm not going to be able to find a husband, I'm going to do it anyway. They thought that they were making the right choices. All of these choices that they made have made it harder than ever for them to actually get married, because the pool of men that they consider eligible is now smaller and smaller. And those men, they're not interested in 35-year-old execs. They're interested in a 25-year-old whatever. They're not as concerned about whatever her job title may be. So it's a really, really hard time. I think I'm a little bit concerned about where it's gonna go, because things continue to be more and more hyper online. People are just more and more online every day, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. I mean, whenever I have some younger women who message me and talk to me about dating and stuff, I mean, the first thing I always say is just get offline. Get offline, because yes, the internet does represent a lot of what we see in the real world. I don't think it's right to say, oh, it's not the real world. It is in a lot of ways. You think these people believe one thing online and then they get off the internet and they believe something different? No. A lot of these people have had these ideologies and values coded into them for a long time, but you have to just get offline. And this is what I tell young women. You're not going to find somebody to settle down with. You're not going to find hope online either, because it's just a lot of rage bait. it's just a place where a lot of people will dump their frustrations, many of which are understandable, but that's just the place where they go to dump it. So I think for a lot of young people who are really seriously interested in marriage and their future, I think one of the first things they have to do is just get offline. But yeah, it's not looking good to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
You may be more hopeful, but it's not really looking that great to me.
It's one of the subjects I find most intriguing, and I have done for about 20 years. It's kind of fascinating how in the past couple years, this gender dynamic conversation has come much more to the forefront over the last 3 years, because it's something I've been aware of. People now, I see the term red pill being thrown around all the time. It's like, in that context, I've been seeing that what people, the manosphere, all that stuff, like I've been very aware of it since like mid 2000s. So it's kind of interesting seeing all these people like very late to the party coming along with it. Something that's interesting I've noticed with you is that you don't straw man the position. I find a lot of conservatives, they just have started kind of calling everything they don't like, those red pill guys. It's like, you don't even really know what that means. You're just kind of using it to describe anything that, in the same way people on the left kind of use like racist or Nazi or white supremacy, you're kind of just calling everyone you don't like is a red pill incel manosphere man.
Yes.
And you're just people are just rejecting, not even listening to the grievances and actually hearing, okay, where has this thing come from? Where has this emerged from? Why are people having these concerns? It's not quote unquote red pill men are the reason why marriage rates are tanking and birth rates are tanking. Like, it's not because some guys online are sharing notes about their experiences and trying to better understand.
They say that's why women aren't voting Republican.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I know. I see that.
I'm like, are you guys okay? You really think that?
Yeah, it's.
you think that's why women aren't voting
No.
conservative? Come on.
Yeah, and in your case, it's like you understand that, and I don't know. It's messy. I think there's so many areas to parse. I mean, online. Firstly, there's the online versus real world conversation, and everything looks worse online than it tends to in reality. When I'm in the UK and I'm going to travel to the US, and people are like cautioning me and saying, oh my gosh, I'd never go to the USA. It's crazy over there. The cities are on fire. There's mass murders all the time. Like, it's so dangerous. There's all this racism. Are you sure you want to go there as a black man, Zuby? Da, da, da. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys need to get off the internet. And then I come to the US and people are like, oh my gosh, I've been seeing what's going on in London and the race riots. And it looks like there's, just terrorism and acid attacks and grooming gangs. And you can't walk down the street without getting stabbed and all. I'm just like, guys, get off the internet and go travel, like, because it happens everywhere. I live in Dubai. People are, oh my gosh, like, is it this and this? Like, there's just so much misconception, because all that ever gets highlighted, whether it's traditional media or it's social media, I always say normal doesn't go viral. So it's always the horror story. It's always even when it comes to dating and mating and marriages, like, it's rare for the viral thing to be, oh, hey, I've got a wonderful marriage and like my kids are doing great and all that. It's, oh my gosh, like, I just went through this whole thing, whether it's coming from a man or it's coming from a woman. And then people, the human brain extrapolates that. And then it becomes all men this, all women that, all white people this, all black people that, all Jews this, all the right. It plays into that tribalism and that fear psychology, and it's weird because I don't know the best way to explain this. On the internet, something can simultaneously be true and also massively misleading. So let's go back to that example of, say, political polarization or some of the things that are happening in different cities and different countries, because now everything's documented. You've got camera footage, you've got photos, you've got video, you've got reports. So it's like, are these things happening? Are murders and robbery and arson and all these things, like, are they happening? It's like, well, yeah, it's real. Like, I've just watched, you can go online and you can watch 100 videos of whatever crime, whatever bad crime exists. You can go and find like videos of 100, 200, 1,000 of these situations going on. And so it's like, well, how can you say that this isn't real? This is how people fall into like the BLM stuff, and they end up believing that 100,000 black people per year are being murdered in the USA by police.
Right.
Because they're like, how are you telling me it's not real? I've seen 20 videos of this happening. I've seen 20 videos of black people being killed by police in the USA. How is this not an epidemic? Because, and it's like, on one hand, it's like that is real, like that is happening, like there's those videos. So you can't say it's never happening, but that's all you're seeing. How many police citizen interactions are there in the USA on an annual basis? It must be over 1 billion.
Yeah.
Right? There must be 350 million people. There's got to be over 1 billion police citizen contacts. Out of those billion, almost all of them are benign.
Right.
Right? It's either benign or it's just, hey, the cop is just doing his job and no one has a problem with it.
Right.
But in the instance something goes wrong, that now gets 1 billion times the coverage of all of the benign ones combined. And it goes viral and boom, here we've got video and that hits your emotion. I have a theory on this. My brain is jumping around everywhere. I have a theory that our brains are not good at determining, because if you think all through human history, prior to the last couple decades, if you saw somebody being killed, hurt, robbed, a city on fire, something, it means you saw it with your own eyes. For most of human history, it means you actually saw it.
Right.
Because like video cameras haven't existed forever. So if you saw that happening, you saw it.
You were there.
Yeah, you were there. And I don't think our brains are wonderful at delineating between seeing all of these things on our phones or on our TV screens. You're seeing people dying on camera. You're seeing places burning. You're seeing this horrible stuff happening. And I don't think our brains can really sort of are great at determining, oh, okay, this is something on a screen that's very distant. It might not even be in my own country versus crap, like I just saw that thing, especially if it's repeating over and over and over. So I think that's where people can get the perception of the level of danger being infinitely higher than it is. Same thing happened with the pandemic situation, right? So people's perception, there are people who think that if you got the Rona, you've got a 10% chance of dying.
Yep.
The reality might be 0.05% or something. But in their brain, it's like, well, it's 10%. And I've seen the videos of people in hospitals. I've seen the videos of this. I've seen this. I've seen that. Like, I'm looking at the stats. And it's like, you're not contextualizing this properly. So I think this is just something in the human design.
Yeah.
And I just think it applies to, coming back to what we were originally talking about, it applies to everything. If you want to find 1,000 stories of horrible things that men have done to women, you can find it. You can find it infinitely. If you want to find it the other way around,
easy.
You can find it. You can find firsthand accounts, people writing stories. This is what I've just been through. This is what's happening. In the USA alone, there's, I think, about 750,000 divorces per year. That's 750,000 stories of a marriage failing per year. I don't know what percentage of those go online. It might only be 1%. But if you were to sit there and read this and then you come to the conclusion, bro, I am not getting married. Those broads are crazy. I'm not doing that. I totally...
Those men are abusive. I'm not getting married.
I can see that. Yeah. And I can see how, women are just like, men are dangerous and cannot be trusted. Like, they're psychos. Look at all these narcissists. Like, look at this, what this girl's just been through. Look at this, look at this, look at this. And I think it's flawed logic, but I also think it makes sense just in terms of the way our psychology works.
Here's another example of that idea of something can be true online, but then it's like totally blown up and exaggerated. And this was a viral debate that women hit the wall at 35. I think that's an example of those two things at once, especially in relation to men and women and dating, is that in a way, because this was, it's still a huge debate online. Do women hit the wall at 35? And then you saw all these women sharing photos of themselves. I'm 37 today. I look better than I did at 22.
Yeah. Most of them don't know what the wall means.
And I'm like, most of them don't know what the wall means.
Yeah.
That's also true. Most of them don't know what it means because in a way, yeah, there's a wall. Yeah. There's a wall for women and it doesn't exist for men in exactly the same way, for sure. Yeah. And I think a lot of these women can't comprehend that, but even the ones who kind of can, just that being true, it's almost like they can't accept it, but then it's just exaggerated. You know, it's like blown out of proportion. And then they think it means that men are saying that women are totally not worth it at all after 35, that you shouldn't even consider dating a woman if she's 34 or even close to 35, that a woman's worth, it just totally plummets and she's never going to be beautiful again after 35. They think it means that a husband's going to look at his wife when she turns 35 and she's no longer going to be pretty. You know what I mean? They blow it up to mean all these different things. So I see that happening a lot with the conversations about men and women and marriage and dating and parenthood, motherhood. Like I see that happening a lot. And it makes it really, really hard to find common ground. It makes it really hard for men and women to, I think, reconcile in a way, because these women have a perception of what they think the men are saying about them.
Yes.
They think that they're being attacked for being over 35. And then they start sharing examples. Girlies, please, don't do it. Don't do it. And then they start sharing photos of like, you know, some A-list celebrity at 42.
Oh, yes.
Look at so-and-so. She looks so good at 45.
And she just had a baby at 50.
And she just had a baby. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course she looks that good. I mean, how much money and resources does she have to look that good? You know, they cherry pick these examples to try to make themselves feel better and attempt to disprove whatever is being said. It just turns into this toxic dump.
I have some interesting thoughts on that.
Yeah.
From both the male and the female
Okay.
perspective. So from the male side, I think this is where you get the, you know, what people might call the dark side of what people now call the red pill, although that's not even really what it means. But I think that I know that for a lot of men, during your teens and your 20s, for a lot of guys, it's just really rough out there because girls and women always have the upper hand in terms of just human mating and interest, right?
Yep.
Guys have to do all of the approaching, face all of the rejection, get burned. Every man out there who's like dated knows you've had situations where you try to do the nice guy thing and be a gentleman, and you get freaking burned, right? And then you're seeing other guys who are being more like jerks or players or whatever, and hey, they're the ones who the girls are interested in, so let me adopt more of those behaviors. So either way, you can get jaded if people stay in this world too long, in the same way women can get jaded, right? If they go through lots of bad experiences. With a lot of guys, it can be like, all right, they keep trying the nice guy thing, and they're like, oh, I'm too nice. Girls will literally say, oh, like, you know, he's too nice. No man will ever be like, oh yeah, like I went on a date, but we didn't have a second because she was too nice. Like that's not a thing. It's a one-way thing, right? And we're taught from a very young age, from our mothers, from our sisters, from society, from the media, you know, be a gentleman, be chivalrous, be this, you know, be nice, buy her chocolate, buy her flowers, whatever. In reality, most modern women, if you were to do that, they'll be like, ugh, oh my gosh, he brought me chocolate and flowers on the first date. Like that's you, right? And people like sort of inherit that, but from the original sort of male mindset, you're like, isn't that what I was supposed to do? Isn't that like the romantic thing? And then people struggle with balance. And so either a lot of guys will kind of flip either the other way and just be like, all right, I'm going to completely sort of disconnect my emotions from this, and I'm going to just play the field and not care. And there's that approach. Or there's I'm going to just sort of stay and suffer through this all, in which case, in both situations, people can get jaded. So I think what happens a lot is there's a lot of men out there now on YouTube and on X and all these platforms who they kind of like to see women get their comeuppance. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like for maybe a decade plus of your life, you've been dealing with like all of women's garbage. And now you've got these women in their mid-30s crying on TikTok in their car, talking about why can't I find a nice man? And guys know it's like there is no way on earth that girl has not rejected hundreds of men. You know it, right? Yeah. There's no way she like, especially if they're attractive. It's like you have rejected hundreds of guys from the time you were 16 up until now, maybe thousands. And I'm sure you've been, well, every guy I date is a jerk or whatever. Like you're chasing players, you're chasing jerks and so on. So a lot of guys are, okay, well, you know, in their brain, they might not even be that conscious of it, but they're like, yeah, well, that's what you kind of deserve, which is a dark place to be.
Yeah.
But I think that's what happens. And then from the female side, I think that due to a lot of the social and cultural and media factors we were discussing earlier, I think that so many women have been programmed to, how would I put it, almost to see themselves just through the lens of physical attractiveness. So both boys and men, girls and women, we go through stages of our lives. And it is true that when a woman is in her, let's say, late teens, early 20s, mid-20s, whatever, she's generally going to be, peak of her beauty, peak of her fertility. If she's especially beautiful, like just the world comes to her. So many offers, men are interested. People are treating her just well because she's pretty and she's beautiful and so on. And that model sort of gets imprinted. And there's a lot of women, I think, who are like, that's how it should be my entire life as I go through my 30s, my 40s, my 50s, my 60s. And so as those looks begin to fade, then they think, well, that is my value. It's not even men sort of saying explicitly that that's the case, but it's, you're not meant to stay just in that phase forever. So I think when you have these situations of, you've got women who are like 40, 50, and they're posting selfies saying like, oh, these men are saying that I'm not, and I'm just like, that is so cringe. You're 50. You're not meant to still be just thinking, like, you shouldn't really care what these guys on the internet even think about your looks at this stage. Like, you're meant to be in a different phase of doing different things that are giving you value. And yeah, you can still be beautiful, but really you're meant to have like a family by now. You're meant to have a husband and they're supposed to love you and you're supposed to be doing things in your community. Like, we're all going to get old. We're all going to get old. I would like to think that when I'm like 70 years old, I'm not going to be right? You know what I mean? I'm not going to be like
flexing in the mirror.
Well, maybe I might once in a while because I still plan to be jacked, right? But not in the way I was when I was 20,
right? And
posting stuff as if I'm still a 20-year-old.
Yeah,
it's just really cringe. It's the same way, and guys can do the same thing where, you're 40 plus and you're still. It's the reason why people find that the old dude at the club who's still like acting. It's creepy. It's kind of weird. It's just like, bro, you're meant to be in a different phase.
Yeah.
Right? You're not 25 anymore. Why are you still doing this thing and you're in the club and you're trying to act like you're still here? It's just weird. It's the sort of Peter Pan thing from the male side, but I think there's a female version of it where it just gets locked in the and that's why I think why women can also have that animosity towards younger women.
Yes.
And they're trying to compete with them on the same footing. It would be like a guy who's 50 and he's trying to like athletically compete with a guy who's 22. And it's just like, bro, like it doesn't matter the sport. Right? At 52, you're not going to be performing like you were at 22. It doesn't mean you're not in shape anymore.
Unless you're like Novak Djokovic, he's going to stay fit forever.
You can still be fit, but even him, it's like, bro, it's going to be a struggle to keep up with these 21-year-olds, these 22-year-olds. Right. And it's true for women in that front as well. But it's like, you're not even meant to be competing with them.
Yeah. Well, that's actually the heart of Snow White. That's what Walt Disney meant Snow White to be. And I've been thinking about this because I did a YouTube video on Rachel Zegler and then, the new Snow White and how she was completely bashing the original story. But if you read the way that Walt Disney and his brother wanted to make this movie based on the Brothers Grimm story, is that it was meant to be this sort of a look at an intergenerational relationship between an older woman who wanted the youth and the beauty of Snow White because she's so young and pure. And I have a theory that one of the reasons we have so many women who are in their, let's say late 30s, 40s, and 50s, who are still trying to prove their beauty online, still trying to do the selfies and say that I'm still hot even though I'm not 25 anymore. I think one of the reasons is because there is a significant decline of mentorship amongst women. When if you go back generations, the older you became as a woman, that means most of the time, almost all the time, that means that your children are getting older. That means you're a more experienced mother and wife and eventually grandmother. And that means the more wisdom you have to impart on the younger generations. And so you have a lot of these older women now because we are so fractured, right? Families are fractured. The intergenerational relationships are fractured. You see a lot fewer relationships now of women who are a little bit older who find fulfillment and meaning out of helping younger women thrive.
Yes.
Because that's really what it should be. Because I know when I'm in my 50s, like I'm going to very much enjoy mentoring younger women in my parish, helping younger women go through pregnancy and birth. And this is one of the amazing things I see in our Orthodox parish is that we have a lot of young families in my church. And, one of my good friends just gave birth this weekend. And then a month before I gave birth, another friend gave birth. And all of the older women in the church, they bring meals, they help with childcare. During the services at church on Sunday, they help and take the little kids so that, you have 5 minutes to just breathe and worship. And you have a lot of these relationships where these women are devoting this free time that they have to helping younger women. And then also women even younger, like in their late teens and early 20s, helping figure out what are they going to do with school? What kind of job do they want to get? What direction should they take in life? And this kind of mentorship is really significantly lacking in women and in a lot of communities, and mostly because the families and the communities have been broken down themselves. So there's not really opportunities for that. And so these women now have all this free time on their hands, and they have too much time to think about their own beauty fading. They have too much time to think about maybe their own self-worth, and they don't have something or somebody to pour it into. And I think that's why we end up with so many of these women who are like still, on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and trying to prove that they're still pretty. And yeah, of course women can be beautiful. Of course. But there is something true about once your fertility declines, there is something that happens to you physically as well. And that's not a way to demonize women who are above 35. It's just, I think in a way, it's actually nice to acknowledge, because then you can ask yourself, what's next for me? There is something more meaningful and even deeper that's next for me in this next phase of my life. And I'm really, really looking forward to it.
Yeah. I think, males and females, we each have our unique challenges in different ways. And, people always like to do is it harder to be a man or is it harder to be a woman? And it's kind of a nonsensical question. It's like we have, some of the burdens are identical because we're just human beings trying to live through this crazy world. But there are certain things that are unique. I can see some very obvious advantages to being male, and I can see some obvious disadvantages, and vice versa. Then you're never going to totally understand it, because despite what modern programming is trying to tell us, you can't actually be both, and you're only going to have one experience, one of those types of experiences throughout your life. But I think that one advantage of being a male, you could consider this an advantage or a disadvantage. I think the older you get, the more it becomes an advantage. But as a man, you get much quicker feedback. If you are a man and you are not living up to the standards of other men or the standards of women or the standards of society in general, they're very quick to tell you. Very, very quick to tell you. No one is afraid to tell a man to man up. No one is afraid to tell a man like what to do. Women are very vocal. Again, men are the ones who face almost all of the rejection, right? Because we're the ones who approach. If you are a man and you don't do anything, nothing good comes to you. You can be a woman and you can sit there and look pretty, and opportunities will come to you. Good things come. That's not the experience of a man, even if you're a good-looking man, unless you're like famous. And to get famous, you have to like do things.
Do something.
Right? And so you very quickly know kind of which direction you're heading in. Whereas people are more willing to be honest with you and tell you the truth and reprimand you if need be. I find with women, modern day women in the West, almost no one tells them the truth. People are just lying constantly. Other women are lying to other women all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Men are lying to you because they're sexually interested and they don't want to. So a lot of guys, we'll say whatever, whether it's from the white knight perspective, and it's just like women can do no wrong, and I'm going to, kind of wear this cape and save all these women and whatever, and I'm going to protect you from, a man says something mean about it, I'm going to protect you, and I'm going to affirm you all the time, tell you how beautiful. You could be a whale. You could be massively fat, and you've literally got people, you've got men and women say, oh, you're beautiful, you're fine just the way you are. If anyone's a problem, it's those male beauty standards, and the men are the problem. Whereas if you're a guy, your bros will be like, bro, you're getting fat.
Yeah.
Like, there's no body acceptance for men. There's no body positivity for men. There's no fat positivity movement for men. It's not a thing, because you just can't lie to men individually and collectively on that level. So I believe that women have a much sort of longer feedback loop. So some of these things, you might not get the feedback for a decade, right? So a 22-year-old woman might be out here doing all this stuff, and she might be doing, let's take an extreme, she might be like doing OnlyFans or some type of sex work or whatever, and that most people aren't going to tell her again, unless she's from like a really strong family, but then she wouldn't be doing it in the first place.
Right.
People are going to affirm her. Yeah, you go, girl. You get your bag. You do what you want to do. Whatever. The guys are simping for her, literally sending her money, validation, and so on. Like, she's like, how am I doing something wrong? Like, I'm benefiting from this. I'm getting, and then she gets to a stage of life, and it's like, oh, the internet is forever. Oh, okay. Like, you're right. You see what I mean? The feedback loops are different. As a guy, you do something wrong, you mess up like very quickly. You're kind of pushed back in line. But I find with a lot of young women, it's kind of like they can just kind of go out there and do whatever, and you're not meant to. If you say anything bad, oh, you're shaming them, or you're this. You're the person casting the judgment is the one who's considered to be out of line, not the person who's doing the thing that is being judged. And it's not until much later that they'll sort of wake up and realize, oh, okay, all of those decisions made over the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years are what has led to this position where I'm now in my car filming myself crying on TikTok. And even at that point, oftentimes they still won't, if someone is honest with them and saying like, hey, maybe these are some of the things that you need to change, or you're there listing, this is what I want in a man. I want, no, right? Like 20 points, which are describing 0.1% of men in your whole country. And you've obviously been failing to get this thing for 10 plus years, and you're still like, yeah, the problem is the men. And there's just not that self-reflection of, hey, maybe I'm the issue here. Maybe there's something that I'm doing wrong. So I think that's a big problem. I just think that there aren't many people who tell young women the truth. I think good fathers tend to. I think good brothers tend to.
Yeah.
I think if you have like genuine, platonic male friends who are looking out for you and aren't trying to, aren't sexually interested, then they'll generally tell the truth. But I just don't think it happens much, and it's leading to a lot of the weird delusion and distorted expectations that we're seeing.
This is one of the reasons why I quit working in media and women's media, because I got to a point where I said, I looked at all the articles that we were publishing, I was editing, and we're lying. A lot of this is lies. It's just lying. And I remember there was one colleague, she was writing an article about PCOS. And she interviewed a couple of doctors, and in the article she said something very true. If you are struggling with obesity, losing weight can help alleviate some of the symptoms of PCOS. And the editorial director took it out without telling her and published it. Like little things like this. And then there's an entire section in the fitness vertical, there's an entire section on body positivity. And it just got to the point where I was like, this is a lie, this is a lie. We're just lying to women, and we're making money off of it. So it's not even like we're lying to you so that you can feel better about yourself. It's that, and then on top of it, we're lying to you so that we're going to make major money off of it. And that just doesn't happen for men. You're not gonna, there's no, I have yet to see a cover of Men's Health or GQ or a fitness vertical in a men's magazine that talks about fat positivity for men.
It won't happen. And if it does, it will be rejected by men.
Yeah, very quickly.
It will be rejected. There's no guy who aspired. They tried the whole dad bod psyop thing.
They did.
And they keep trying it, and it's like, it doesn't work.
It won't land.
No, it won't land, because you guys know, again, whether or not you're a guy who's even like in shape and who works out or whatever, you still recognize what the ideal is. It doesn't matter. You can't convince guys that it's better to be broke than to have money.
Right.
You can't convince them that it's better to be unambitious than to be ambitious. Like, we recognize the reality. Like, if you're a guy who's short guys know, hey, it would be easier if I were tall.
Yeah. And
I'd get more interest from, and it's just a reality, and that's a rough one, because you really can't do anything about your height, right? Yeah. And women can judge quite harshly on that, and I don't think that that's fair. But it's just like, hey, this is just reality. This is biology. This is just how it is. So from pretty young, I think most guys just get that smack of reality of just like, okay, this is just how the world is, and I need to, you can choose different paths at that point. You can decide to just be, it's too hard. The game is too hard. So I'm going to just mostly drop out. And sadly, millions of men take that path. Or you can take the path of, okay, I need to self-improve. If I want to be more respected by men, more respected by society, I want to be more attractive To women, I want to be capable. Okay, I need to become a better protector. I need to become a better provider. I need to become more competent in different skills. I need to become a better speaker. I need to become a better listener. I need to perhaps be a little less selfish, and I need to be more generous. I need to offer something of value to the world, and then the things that I desire are on the opposite end of me developing myself and offering something of value to the world. It's not just like, hey, I'm just pretty. And so things just come to me. And
I manifest them.
Yeah. So it's, and I think at the root of a lot of this stuff is just the denial of the difference between the two sexes.
Yeah.
The polarity. Because all the things I'm saying, people have known these things for thousands of years. They didn't need, feminism or the red pill or internet forums or apps or whatever it is to fundamentally understand this polarity. They've always just known it, which is why certain norms exist. It's why certain traditions exist. It's why certain advice is given. And we live in this we just have this extreme hubris in our society now where it's like, well, that's old. Those are old ideas. Let's just throw it away. Oh, Bible, old ideas, thousands of years old book. Like, why should we do this? Why should we do this that way? And then the technology enables it all. The technology allows people to dodge the consequences of the real world actions, or at least to delay them. And you're seeing this now, an increasing reliance on technology. You could say starting with birth control, which is really the first transhuman experiment, because you're sort of shutting down a body's natural function so that women can essentially be more like men and compete more directly with men. And now, even whether it's egg freezing or it's like all of the, IVF or, whatever people's thoughts are on all of these things, it's all almost like a fight against just doing what is biologically natural and the norm, and trying to use technology we can hack it this way and get around it that way and all of these things. Whereas actually, if you just, it's maybe like yourself, this is one of the things that's like drawn me deeper into my Christian faith, is the older I get, the more I'm just like, man, the Bible's right about everything.
Yeah.
And this is why these rules and ideas exist.
Yep.
This is why,
Yep.
I think as a child, people can think it's just because the book says, but there are very practical, logical, rational, long-term reasons why certain prescriptions are given, and there's certain commandments and certain direction, because it's like, oh, you veer completely off of this, and we're having an entire conversation about what happens when a society at large, both men and women, just decide, oh, we shouldn't do this that way. Let's just reinvent the wheel.
What do you think about the, I don't want to call it a trend, but kind of, the OnlyFans girls to trad wife pipeline? Because
I've only seen like a couple.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's really a trend, although I could see it becoming one over the course of time. If I'm totally honest, I guess I have slightly mixed feelings. Look, whether a man or a woman, I mean, just the other week I was at the Tucker Carlson event, and Russell Brand was on stage.
Yeah.
I'm from the UK. Like, I've been aware of Russell Brand for a long time, and frankly, he used to be a complete degenerate.
Yeah.
And lived that life, philandering, drugs, alcohol, all of that for like a long time, and he's come to Christ very publicly and transformed his life. And as Christians with a Christian heart, again, if I pray that everything is, only God knows anyone's heart, and I pray that the conversion is genuine and is going to be a lifelong thing, and that's wonderful. The whole concept of Christianity is, no matter what you've done in the past, however you've sinned grievously, in minor ways, however much you've sinned, that you can be saved. So I'm never going to, it would be a sin for me to feel, negatively about people coming to Christ and being saved. And that would be massively hypocritical as well, because I've sinned as well. I also think that there's a bit of a danger, potentially, if people sort of adopt an attitude of, okay, I can kind of do whatever I want, and then I can
Yeah.
just sort of, God and society and everything can just like, I can just sort of snap my fingers and everyone's supposed to forget about, you hear people saying, oh, does someone's past matter? It's like, well, yeah. Is it everything? No. But does someone's past matter? If I had a son or a brother or a good friend of mine and he was dating a woman who used to do pornography and he's, and she stopped doing it and he's considering marrying her, I can simultaneously say, okay, good. It's good that they've stopped, and I hope that they've repented and been saved from that. I also think you should be extraordinarily cautious. I probably wouldn't recommend that. And there are real world ramifications that even if you are saved by Christ, there are real world ramifications that you can't delete.
Consequences.
If those videos are still out there, or your kid's going to see those videos one day and, start. So, and you've got to just live with the thought of, okay, she stopped doing that, but as a man, you've got something in you which you're like, oh gosh, she's kind of done all of this stuff. So those ramifications just, they exist. It's like if there was a guy out there who's, I don't know, been to prison and he's like, I don't know, he murdered someone or he's like a drug dealer or did this or whatever, and a woman I know and love is like, yeah, I'm dating this guy and thinking of getting married. I mean, I would never be like, oh, absolutely not under any conditions, but you've got to, it's totally reasonable to be, hey, consider X, Y, and Z and make sure that you make sure they truly have changed and they're not still an addict or that they're not still involved in this stuff and that they've, and ultimately that comes down to individuals. So I think it's not even a male-female thing per se. I think the type of sin can somewhat differ, which one is kind of more common based on the person's sex. But yeah, the Bible says be wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove. Is that the one? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, and then cunning as what is it?
Oh gosh, I don't want to misquote, but there's the wisdom, there's the gentleness and there's the wisdom, and we should always have discernment.
Discernment,
We should have discernment, and there's a balance. I think this is one of the hardest parts of our faith is that balance between lots of aspects of balance. The balance between judgment and compassion and or tolerance, and discernment versus cynicism. Loving people versus enabling bad behavior.
Right.
All of these things. I think it's complicated, and I don't think as a human being we can totally know the answers because we can't fully see inside people's hearts. We can just see their long-term actions and the fruit that comes with that. Yeah,
we definitely don't know people's hearts. A lot of people have been asking me this question lately because there have been quite a few prominent cases. And one thing that always comes to mind when someone asks me this is Saint Mary of Egypt, and she was a prostitute for most of her life, and she is venerated every Lent season in the Orthodox Church. But her story is really incredible because after she repented and she came to Christ, she went to the desert. She was there for 40 years. Mm-hmm. She went to the desert and she prayed and she fasted and she went out of the public life. Yeah. And I think there's something to that. Being very repentant, being very humble, and anyone can be saved. As Christians, we believe that anyone can be saved. And sometimes that's hard to say and really believe. Mm. It's really hard because then a lot of people will be like, okay, well, what about serial killers?
It doesn't fit the human version of justice.
It really doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't, because God's mercy is inexplicable. We can't comprehend it. Kind of like how we can't really comprehend something like infinity, these concepts that we can't fully comprehend. We will never be able to fully comprehend God's mercy. But I do think that there is, I always point to St. Mary of Egypt because when a priest found her, she had been living in the desert and living off of whatever food she could find, and she was just in prayer. And that was sort of, her repentance for this lifetime of degeneracy.
Yes.
But she is honored as one of the most well-known saints in the church, especially during the Lent season. So I think her story is really inspiring, because I always encourage women, it doesn't matter what your background is, there's always redemption for you. And I always talk about this when it comes to abortion, because when people talk about abortion, there's always someone online that says, okay, well, so you think that all women who've had abortions are terrible people and that they should be punished. It's not about that. The message that I think young women should hear, particularly about abortion, and you can say this about things like OnlyFans too, is that it doesn't matter what your past is or what you have done. You can always find grace and redemption through Christ. But there is that element about, for example, St. Mary's story,
Yes.
is that there is some meaning to be found in quieting yourself. And maybe, at least for a period of time, coming out of the public eye, and to really live in private, and to have a relationship with the spiritual father, and to have a mentor, and to really fully come out of that life. And I think in many cases that is what is missing. That doesn't mean that the person's heart is not in the right place. That doesn't mean that we can say where that person's heart is. But in this hyper digitized world where everybody has a camera on them at all times, I think there's a lot of value to kind of stepping away and encouraging people to step away after a lifestyle like that, whether it's a man or a woman. And I think that's missing oftentimes, because, and in a way I understand, because when you first find Christ,
Passionate.
you're excited.
Yeah.
It's the most exciting thing in the world. I mean, there are no words to describe the feeling that you feel when you realize that Christ died for your sins, and that they can be wiped away. But I think sometimes it's easy to get carried away with that.
Yeah, it is. And it's complex, I'm obviously a Christian, but I'm good at being able to see things I can take my Christian lens off and see things how a lot of secular people do, and just think in that point. And I can get how someone who is not of that faith, or say of any faith, I see where the skepticism and cynicism comes from, where they kind of look at it just like, oh, right, so you can just live your life like whatever, do all of these things, and then you can just like say you now found Jesus and it's all good. Again, it doesn't fit the human view of justice. It's just like, again, it doesn't matter man or woman. It's just kind of like, wait, like bro went out and you like killed people and you sold drugs and you did this and you did this, and now you just like, you can just erase it all, and now you're better than me. Because, right? So I can, that's not my viewpoint,
Right.
but I can empathize with it. I can understand why people are kind of skeptical of like, is that really, it's often a criticism people have of Christians or of churches in general.
Yeah. Right.
They're like, oh, well, they're hypocrites because they're not living their lives perfectly or whatever, and then they're going to church on Sunday. And yeah, I don't know. I'll tell you something, just looping back around to something we were discussing earlier, because you were saying you're kind of getting black-pilled on the gender dynamic conversations and conversations around dating and marriage and all these type of things. I'll tell you what I think is, I think right now I think these conversations have been long overdue. And I think that the process is, right now, it's the sort of needing to break eggs to make an omelet situation, where right now it's messy and it's very emotionally charged, and a lot of people are angry, and there's a lot of venom and a lot of personal attacks and insults and weirdness. But that's better than just acting like these problems don't exist, and that everything is hunky-dory and it's going to be fine, and marriage rates are tanking, birth rates are tanking, more and more men and women are just checking out of even being interested in the other sex. Like it's all trending in a certain direction, and it's like, to fix any problem, or to even attempt to, you at least need to be willing to discuss it. So yeah, the discourse could be a lot better. It could be a lot more honest. It could be a lot more compassionate. There could be less straw manning, but ultimately, at least this stuff is coming to the fore now. So perhaps, I could be wrong, we could just be cooked. Or it could be that 5, 10, 20 years down the line, it's like, okay, these conversations are kind of hashed out. There are solutions that people can implement in their, at least in their personal, individual lives, to have a better situation with that. And maybe even on a social, a cultural, a national level, certain things are put in place where it's like, okay, we can't have our birth rate dropping to Japan or South Korea levels. We need to do something. We need to rejig certain things. We need to change some of the cultural programming, the media programming, whatever it is, to reverse some of these trends. Same with something like obesity or a lot of these other issues. And then in the long term, the century, humanity it ends up on a better trajectory this century, because you go through that painful process
right.
of hashing out all of these issues and coming to solutions. Because I think for quite a long time it's just been like, oh, let's just pretend none of this is going on and pretend it's all totally fine, and these 18-year-olds are all just crazy and whatever. It's like, no, they need guidance. Yeah. From people who can offer it. They need direction.
Yeah, I think it's nice that we're seeing a lot of feminist ideas being dismantled. And yes. I'm actually hopeful about Gen Z, because what I've seen a lot is these younger women who are opposing hustle culture. They're opposing the girl boss era, where you go to school and you get top marks and you get a great job, you climb the corporate ladder and you bust that glass ceiling and you work and you sleep with your phone under your pillow and you don't have time for dates because you're going to conquer the world, you're going to be an entrepreneur. And I see a lot of younger women in their early 20s, they're like, actually, no, we don't really want to do that. I would rather track my menstrual cycle, learn about my hormones. I actually see quite a few women now who are getting rid of the pill, getting rid of the birth control pill. There was this TikToker, she has like 8 million followers, Madeline something. Someone sent me her video because she was saying, I have not ovulated in 7 years because I've been on the pill for 7 years, but I'm throwing it away. I want to ovulate. And you're seeing now more of these younger TikTokers and influencers. And then when they say, oh, I don't want to be on the pill, I want to give it up, I always look at the comment section and I'm pleasantly surprised at how many of the girls say, I gave it up last year, I've never felt better, the sky is blue again, I'm finally attracted to men again, my headaches are gone, my acne is better, and they talk about how much better their life is getting off of the pill. So there are some of these feminist things that are being dismantled a little bit by the younger generation, I think, because we're willing to have more of these conversations, and you have to get down and dirty, and it gets a little icky sometimes. Yep. But I'm encouraged by some of these things that I see, because these women are not wanting to slave away for the corporations and climb the corporate ladder. They would rather find a softer, more feminine way of living. Femininity is actually, it's making a comeback. There are a lot of these younger content creators, whether it's YouTube or TikTok, where they're talking about how to reclaim femininity. And they're not talking about it from this political sense. They're not talking about it from a necessarily conservative point of view. They're just talking about it from a more health and wellness point of view. And that's encouraging to me. And then you see a lot of women who are waking up to the dangers of birth control. And birth control is something that I talk about a lot on my page, because most women, especially millennials, like a lot of us were given the pill when we were very young.
It's crazy. To
heal your menstrual cycle and to get rid of headaches and to help you, I don't know, whatever they say it is. Like, it was given to me when I was 19 because I had a painful cycle and I almost died from it. So it's just, you see a lot of these things coming out now that they make me a little bit more hopeful. Now, I don't know so much about the men and women in dating, but when it comes to a lot of these younger women, the way they're taking care of themselves, I am becoming a little bit more hopeful.
Good. Gina, what's next for you? Obviously, you're a mother, so
yeah,
mothering and all that good stuff, I understand, is going to be the priority. But anything that people should be aware of?
I'm trying to grow my YouTube. Trying to focus more on YouTube these days. Trying to use the free time that I have to grow my YouTube. So if you go to my channel, The Shift with Gina, that's my YouTube page I'm trying to grow. I'm just trying to do some more videos and do a lot more cultural commentary. I've been enjoying kind of commenting on some entertainment stuff too, to talk about how it's reflective of some cultural shifts that we're seeing, a lot of which are, talking about the death of the girl boss and things like that. But YouTube has been my main focus these days. Awesome. I would say that's like the bigger thing that I'm focusing on now.
Awesome. And before we go, we've had some, I don't know, mixed colored pills here, but can you give everybody a white pill? Give let's see. How should we do this? Let's have I have a lot of young listeners, so let's have a message for. Give a message for young women and a message for young men. That could both be one message, or it could be two separate ones.
I'll give the pink pill message to young women.
Okay.
This is what I call the pink pill. It's never, ever too early to start preparing for marriage and motherhood. It's never too early. It's never too early to start preparing your body for pregnancy, to really look at your fertility. And I think that I know that if women who focus more on their health and their fertility at a young age, everything else comes from it. You're going to look your best. You're going to feel your best. You're going to have a very healthy cycle. Your relationships are going to be healthier. Everything else blossoms from it. And I would really encourage women to start dating seriously younger. Don't wait, because it's I'm not saying I'm not necessarily in that camp of you need to get married right away and have 10 kids as soon as possible. The most important thing is you find the right person, but it's not too early to start looking. So I would say to start looking earlier than you think you should. And for the young men, don't waste time. I think young men can accomplish so much more than they think they can when they're young. And these young men now have so many great resources and so many other great men to look up to. And don't waste your time, and don't doubt yourself, because these young men, I really believe, can accomplish amazing things, not only for themselves, but for our culture and for our society. I think there are some great things ahead for these young men. So work hard now, because, one day when you become a husband and a father, you're going to have less time to accomplish things. So pour everything that you have into it now.
Beautiful. Agree on both points. Gina, so good to talk.
This is great. It was good to see you, Zuby.
Likewise.
Thank you for having me.